Hey guys, how is it going? Roger says hey. He's got his Alexander the Great hat on because we are back with this video that I should have done like weeks ago. So I have wanted to do more ancient history on my channel, and I actually went through some ancient Rome stuff, ancient Greece, and then we went through the Alexander the Great series on Epic History TV. And this is the video that I meant to get to, and just kind of like it got swept under the rug because I kind of got caught up in some other stuff. So I'm circling back to this. We want to kind of finish out this Epic History TV series on Alexander the Great by listening to this greatest speech ever, apparently. I don't know what it's going to be about. I do remember that there was a big battle, and I feel like, I think I mentioned in that video, I think that this is when he gave this speech. It has to be. But of course, it's all the details are a little fuzzy to me because it's been a while since I watched the videos. And I am interested to see, I guess this is going to be a motivational speech for his soldiers before they went into battle. That's what I'm assuming. So without further ado, let's just, let's check out and let's see what Alexander the Great had to say. The Opus Mutiny. In a brilliant 10-year campaign, Alexander and his Macedonian army conquered much of the known world from Egypt to the Indus River. Remember that? 324 BC, they returned to Opus, near modern Baghdad, where Alexander ordered some of his Macedonian veterans to return home. But angry at perceived insults to their honor, as well as Alexander's adoption of Persian customs, they mutinied. Okay, I do remember this happening. According to the ancient historian Arrian, Alexander executed 13 ringleaders before confronting the army. Alexander's exact words were not known, but modern historians believe Arrian records the essence of a real moment of history passed down by eyewitnesses. So he's executed 13 of the mutineers, and he's now confronting the army.
What I'm about to say isn't meant to stop you returning home. As far as I care, you can go wherever you wish. But I want you to know how you have behaved towards me, and how I have treated you. I'll begin, as is right, with my father, Philip. When he found you, you were mere peasants, wearing hides, tending a few sheep on the mountain slopes, and you could barely defend them from your neighbors. Under him, you began living in cities, with good laws and customs, and he turned you from slaves into rulers over those very barbarians who used to plunder your land. He conquered most of Thrace, taking the best harbors so there was trade and prosperity, and put the mines to steady work. The Thessalians, they used to terrify you. Well, we rule them now. The Athenians and Thebans, always looking for a chance to attack Macedonia, were so humbled, myself playing my small part in the war, that they no longer take tribute from Macedonia, but instead depend upon us for their protection. My father went to the Peloponnese and put their house in order. Then he was declared supreme commander of all the Greeks for the campaign against the Persians, an honor not just for himself, but for all Macedonians. This is what my father Philip did for you. Great enough on its own, but small compared to what you've gained from me. I crossed the Hellespont, even though back then the Persians still commanded the sea. I defeated the satraps of the great King Darius, and made you rulers of Ionia, Aeolis, Phrygia, and Lydia, and took Miletus by siege. The rest of the land surrendered willingly, and their wealth became yours. All the riches of Egypt and Cyrene, which I won without a fight, are yours now. Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, all belong to you. The wealth of Lydia, the treasures of Persia, the jewels of India and the outer sea. You are now satraps. You are generals and captains. What have I held?
What's the satrap?
Satraps. You are generals and captains. What have I held back for myself apart from this purple cloak and diadem? Nothing. No man can point to my riches, only the things I hold in trust for you all. And what would I do with them anyway? I eat what you eat. I get no more rest than you. Many times I have spent the night on watch so that you could sleep soundly. Who among you believes he's worked harder for me than I have for him? Come on! If you've got scars, strip and show them to me. I'll show you mine. There isn't one part of my body, the front at least, that doesn't bear a wound. My body's covered in scars from every weapon you can think of. Swords, arrows, stones, clubs. All for the sake of your lives, your glory, and your wealth. And yet here I still am, leading you, as conqueror of land and sea, rivers, mountains, and the plains. We've celebrated our weddings together. Many of your children will be cousins of my own. I've paid off your debts without asking how you got them, even though you're paid well enough and pillage every city we take. Many of you wear golden crowns, badges of courage and honor given you by me. Any one of us who was killed, who met a glorious end, we buried with full honors. Many now stand immortalized by bronze statues in Macedonia. Their families are honored and pay no taxes. Under my command, not one man has been killed fleeing the enemy. And now, I wanted to send back some of you who've been wounded or crippled, or have grown old, to be welcomed back home as heroes. But since you all wish to go, then all of you, go! Go home and tell them that your king, Alexander, conqueror of the Persians, Medes, Bactrians, and Scythians, who now rules over the Parthians, Chorasmians, and Hyrcanians as far as the Caspian Sea, who's marched over the mountains of the Hindu Kush, crossed the Oxus and Tanais rivers, even the Indus, first to cross it since Dionysus himself. I would have crossed the Hyphasis too if you hadn't cowered in fear. Who sailed into the Great Sea from the mouth of the Indus. Who crossed the desert of Gedrosia, where no one had ever led an army. Who took Carmenia, while my fleet sailed the Persian Gulf. When you get home, you tell them that when you made it back to Susa, you abandoned him and went home, leaving him under the protection of the foreigners you'd conquered. Perhaps this report of yours will seem glorious in the eyes of men, and worthy in the eyes of the gods. Be gone!
So after the speech, the Macedonian troops begged Alexander for forgiveness, leading to an emotional reconciliation between the king and his army. Alexander began to plan further conquests, but in Babylon, less than a year later, he succumbed to an illness and died, age 32. Alright, well, very interesting. I do kind of recall all of that happening now in the previous videos I watched on, his campaign to conquer all of that stuff. It's interesting also that that speech turned the opinion of his army back towards him again, and I guess he avoided, you know, a full mutiny of his army just abandoning him. I just don't know enough though about him and, you know, all of the circumstances. Epic History TV went more into just the military aspect of it. I didn't really learn a whole lot about him personally and some of his more like personal accomplishments that he was alluding to in this speech, and just that relationship between him and his soldiers. I think they just briefly touched on that in Epic History TV's series, but I don't really know enough about it. It's interesting to hear him talk about it though, how he treated his soldiers more like comrades maybe, and friends rather than, you know, this kind of like dictator, you know, type figure. At the same time though, I think, you know, me being in, you know, today's times when you hear politicians making speeches like this all the time where they try to prop up their accomplishments and just like all of the other, you know, quote unquote, you know, leaders and dictators throughout history or whatever, a lot of times they'll try to trick the masses into believing that they are benefiting them in some way, and they're going to rescue them or give them, you know, a bunch of things. But in reality, all they want to do is just maintain control over everybody. So part of me is just like really cynical when I hear stuff like this too. It's kind of like, how much of this is like really genuine? How much of it is just him trying to keep his army from abandoning him? And it's just talk, you know? Because without his army, he's really nothing, right? He can't do what he can do without them. So I guess this is the greatest speech ever because it avoided a mutiny, it avoided his army from abandoning him. He was able to convince them, like make them do a 180, which definitely is very impressive. Like, it takes a lot of skill. You have to be a good orator, you have to be a good persuader in order to do something like that. So, and I'm assuming also that this was probably just off the top of his head, you know. Today, you know, speeches get written out and all of that stuff. You know, if this is just like on a battlefield somewhere, he's trying to motivate his army, I'm sure that a lot of this might have been just like off the top of his head, which is even more impressive. So, but it was really cool to like see the details of this. You know, we had a very just kind of brief mention of this happening in the Epic History TV videos, so getting to some of the nitty-gritty of exactly how Alexander the Great accomplished this and kept his army going with him is really cool to kind of see the details of that. So I've had a lot of you guys recommend that I should look at Hannibal, so he might be the next like a kind of ancient history thing that I do on my channel. So make sure you guys stay tuned for all of that, and also make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and check out my social media links, Discord, Patreon links, all in the description and in my pinned comment. Roger, Mr. Alexander over here, and I thank you guys for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.